Hey, and welcome to another hungover podcast where Julien is a little bored, but very excited to be here. And I'm also
Bored?
Yvonne.
Oh.
Yeah, you just started with a sigh. I imagine that you're a little bored to be here, talking to me again, doing the same old thing every time.
Every time.
But you could do something new if
What?
you wanted to. You could listen to this on YouTube or SoundCloud or Google Play or iTunes. And then even on iTunes, you could do something even more new than that. You leave a little review, put a little comment there, and just tell everybody how you felt about this podcast. It helps to spread our podcast a little bit and lets you express your views. So really, you want to be the person you want to be. Let everybody else know what you feel, and just do it through the medium of writing a comment on our podcast.
That would be amazing for helping us get out to more people on all of these things.
You, the commenter and reviewer, matter more than us. So make sure that you tell us what your opinion is.
We do this for you guys, so please do that. Vaughn, thank you so much for the introduction.
You had no idea I was starting, so it was great. It was one of the surprise ones where I just go.
Those are the best. It's usually halfway through one of my sentences because that's how you like to do it. But I'm so professional that I just get into gear right on it. But Yvonne, we start our podcast out every single week by asking each other, what media have you been consuming and what did you drink last night?
Well, since I'm back on the wagon, I'm going to start us off. I had like a mojito this week and a few different things.
Okay.
The thing I had that is probably most interesting is an Atwater Cabernet Franc Rosé.
Okay.
It was either Cabernet Franc or Blanc Frankish Rosé. It was pretty darn good. So a lot of the Atwater wines that I'd had previously have been mediocre. I got a lot of them for free because I got a Connect.
Oh.
So it wasn't too bad, because there was literally no cost investment for me.
Yes.
But this Blanc Frankish Rosé was actually really, really delicious, and I kind of highly recommend it as a new place to stop on the vineyard tours in the Finger Lakes, just to check out what they have going on for them. I would really like to explore a little bit more of what they have, especially in a tasting room, because it can often kind of reveal different grapes, varietals, and everything that they have to shop around for your palate. So that I'm pretty excited about. Outside of that, I didn't do anything really exciting in terms of drinking this week. But I have tried a few new places around Syracuse, including a place called St. Urban, which is a new, upscale wine bar eatery. It's on Westcott, in the place where the old Indian restaurant used to be on Westcott.
Awesome.
And they tout themselves as a wine place. I had their appetizer, aperitif, champagne, and it was pretty awful.
Yeah.
It was super sweet, grape juicy. It was pretty shit.
For the basic white bitch, huh? Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Great.
But the overall menu was pretty delicious. They had a 3-course tasting menu.
All right.
And my friend and I went there, and we didn't want any of the desserts, so we were able to split 6 extremely delicious cheeses for dessert.
Nice.
I had a sea urchin and sea bass appetizer. Then I had some lamb for my main course and cheese to finish, strong Stilton and others. And then we had a terrace wine, which was pretty amazing.
Wow.
So the overall experience was really great.
That's
I really enjoyed that.
Syracuse, a cultured New York City.
It's really weird because this place is super out of this restaurant is super out of place being on Westcott.
Yeah, I feel like it is there.
It's quickly becoming one of the better eateries in the city. So it's just
making names for themselves, huh?
I know, right? We totally don't fit into the culture of what Westcott used to be, but the new upscale Westcott is exactly what we plan to mesh into. Awesome. So this is a neighborhood that used to kind of be kind of hipstery.
Yeah.
The weirdos would be there.
Yeah, there were some weirdos there. I agree.
Yeah, and now it's mostly just like SU students, and SU is a private university, so it has a generally wealthier student body.
Yes,
and so the improvements that are being made in the Westcott area are geared more towards higher scale ventures. So they're tearing down a lot. They plan to tear down a lot of the old staples and make. Oh my god! I don't know why I'm so bored with myself. And put in some new stuff that's supposed to be a bit more upscale.
All right.
And so, like Dorian's, which is a staple pizza place, which is likely to give you food poisoning, allegedly, every 3 times you go there.
Well, it was worth it.
Or so the story goes.
No, I'm kidding.
But yeah. Other than that, in terms of things I've been doing this week, media I've been consuming, I've been watching a lot of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver on YouTube.
Yeah, nice.
Pretty good stuff. I don't think I made it to the movie theaters.
That
and
sucks.
I've began to replay Mass Effect.
Wow, that's
the original
an
Mass
old
Effect.
game. And is it holding up? How's it doing?
It's not. The weird thing is,
do you have it on PC?
Going back, I'm playing it on PC for the first time. So previously I had played it on Xbox. And maybe PS4, but I'm pretty sure Xbox. And it's pretty weird because going back to play Mass Effect, because I played Mass Effect Andromeda on PS4.
Mm-hmm.
So
a big mistake, but okay.
Playing Mass Effect and then thinking back on it, Mass Effect Andromeda is really close to how the original Mass Effect feels.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Really wonky. They have a lot of graphics problems.
Yes.
The enemies in both are stupid and feel kind of out of place. So it kind of like, in terms of the sequence of the series, like the first Mass Effect and Mass Effect Andromeda feel like echoes of each other.
Yeah.
Oh god. Oh, the worst. I don't know why. I have literally not been yawning until I just started recording, obviously. It's also getting to my bedtime, but whatever.
Understandable.
I was up at 6:30 thanks to my cat this morning.
Cats.
Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, it's really weird because Mass Effect and Mass Effect Andromeda feel very close in that they're both wonky. They feel clunky. They feel underdeveloped. They feel massive. There's a lot of things that you can do. The thing, like, Mass Effect Andromeda is still streamlined in some ways. Like, the weapon and inventory system in Mass Effect is bizarre, massive, and clunky.
Okay.
The weapon system and inventory in Mass Effect Andromeda is not as super bulky, but feels less streamlined than it did in Mass Effect 2 or Mass Effect 3. So it really feels like these two games are so close to each other, and maybe that's what the core of the franchise is.
Okay.
And then Mass Effect 2 is just an anomaly, because Mass Effect 2 was one of the best games I'd ever played in my life. I still think it's one of the top 5 games I've ever played. It's very sleek. It's succinct. You can do a lot of really cool shit and feel you're integrated with the narrative and the gameplay, even if it's just like hit R2 to bash the reporter in the face or whatever. You feel really engaged in the story. It doesn't feel clunky to go scanning all of the planets as much as the Mako is.
Yeah.
And they streamlined it even more in Mass Effect 3, but Mass Effect 3 was a worse game than Mass Effect 2. So I really feel like Mass Effect 2 is just a standalone anomaly, and that what we're hoping is to rekindle the massive integration of the story of Mass Effect with the gameplay of Mass Effect 2, and that's so hard to do in the iterations of the story that go on, including wrapping up, which is always the worst, because everybody is always super happy with whatever new series or new game is introduced, new world, and they always hate how it wraps up. So
Well, who
We'll
knows?
see.
You know, I feel like we might not get a Mass Effect Andromeda 2 because BioWare did a big old flop with Anthem, and EA loves to destroy studios that make shitty games. Once. They have one chance with EA, essentially. One fuck up.
Well, I'm hoping that Mass Effect Andromeda isn't the last
Mass Effect
part of that series because it was
a sour note.
actively bad.
Did they make that game? Did they make that game?
I think
a different studio made Andromeda. I thought
it wasn't a core. It was weirdly farmed out. I think as I can't remember exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Production. I don't know. Come back to me. I'll get to you in a second. Why don't you start telling us what you did?
Yeah, for me, I've been playing some games. I beat Fire Emblem Three Houses on my first playthrough, and I'm playing it again already because it's actually that good of a game. I think I really like this game, and also it's essentially designed to have you play it 3 times anyways, and it's kind of a long game to begin with. Because there's 3 different story paths that you can choose. So I'm playing again. I started with the Black Eagles first, and now I'm playing with the Blue Lions. And you get a different group of people to play with, and they're all really integral to the story. So I'm playing it on hard mode now, because, I think it was a little too easy on normal for being a Fire Emblem veteran, I guess. I'm just used to the gameplay. So I think it's best suited on hard mode for people who have played the game, previous Fire Emblem games before. I'm really liking it even the second time, so I can't wait to get to the later parts of the game with this group of characters. And I highly suggest anyone who has a Switch to pick this game up. I think it's worth picking up. Next up, I also forgot to say that I beat Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty on the last podcast, which was 2 weeks ago. Right. And yeah, that game was super fun. That game is awesome. It has a lot of crazy plot twists, and the last battle is really awesome as well. All the boss fights in that game are really fun. I think I had a lot of fun with that game.
I've played 3.5 of these games.
Yeah, you gotta play 2, man. I think it's it's kind of difficult to go back to because as a fixed camera, as opposed to Metal Gear Solid 3 and 4, which allow you to change the camera view. I actually just started Metal Gear Solid 3 on Friday for my stream. On my stream.
Is that Snake Eater?
That's Snake Eater. Yeah, that's
a great game.
First one chronologically in the series, where you play as the boss or Naked Snake until you beat the game, and then you become Big Boss. But yeah, that game is super fun, and you have to eat a lot of snakes and frogs and shit in order to live. It's definitely a step forward in the series, considering they're actually allowed to give you camera control, which I think was part of. I feel like the first 2 games wouldn't work with camera control because the levels were designed in such a way. But this game was obviously designed with the right stick on your controller in mind, so it works out. And I'm having a blast playing that game. The story is super awesome. I think Kojima decided this is when the series sort of started getting famous for having hour-long cutscenes. I think an hour of my stream was just watching one cutscene. It took forever to... Oh, God. Holy crap. It was an hour of my 4-hour stream. Like, come on. I was just watching a cutscene. So I'm playing that game. And let's see what... Oh, I actually had a drink. I made a margarita. But this one was inspired by Stone Cold Steve Austin. Nikki and I watched the Do you know the show Hot Ones on YouTube?
Yes.
Yeah,
Stone Cold. He was just on it.
Yeah, he was just on it. So we watched that episode, and now I mean, it's my goal to be on that show at some point. I intend to do it at some point, so we'll see. No, I don't know. You have to be pretty famous to be on it, but
we'll get you there.
It's my goal. It's my goal. Whether I'm a YouTube star or something like that. No, I'm kidding. I will never be a YouTube star. But if I can't do it, I want to buy all their hot sauces and do it myself. I think we should do it. That would be fun. I
think so too.
Chicken wing.
Although I've discovered very recently that any level of super spicy makes me unable to function GI wise the next day.
Yeah. You're getting to that age, huh?
Yep.
I feel like I haven't had anything super spicy in a long time. The last thing I had was the spicy ramen that I did for the stream.
Oh yeah.
That didn't end well. Oh boy, that didn't end well. Let's put it that way. Yeah, so let's see. I do want to try their hot sauces though, or at least the last dab. That one sounds pretty good. But yeah, so on that episode, Stone Cold Steve Austin, known for drinking a lot of beer, of course, he described his. I think he had some collaboration with a. Oh no, he has his own beer, with a beer brewing company. He sort of figured that out, but he also likes tequila a lot, so he has a recipe he tells you a recipe in that episode for a margarita, and it involves Grand Marnier, which is pretty cool. So I've actually never bought Grand Marnier or tried it in my life, so we bought a bottle and we made sort of a makeshift version of it because we didn't have lime juice. We had yuzu, which is a Japanese citrus it's a citrus that only grows in Japan. It's sort of like a cross between a lemon and a lime, but it's difficult to grow. I mean, you could grow it other places, but it's very difficult to grow, and it's native to Japan. And I really like this. We have yuzu extract, so you can buy just the extract in Japanese supermarkets. And so we had that, and then we also had we had mezcal instead of tequila. So
oh my god, you just fucked everything.
Yeah, we completely fucked up the drink, but it was still pretty good. So basically he, the correct proportions, but the idea is to float a shot of Grand Marnier on top of the drink, and you get real fucked up. It's a lot. It's like a 3 alcohol drink. It's great. Have you ever had Grand Marnier?
Yes.
I think it's pretty good.
It's great. It's a delicious thing. I think my mom really likes it as just having it as a beverage on its own.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck does this actually taste like? And it's really delicious.
It's amazing. I either, to make a really delicious margarita, I either go with Cointreau or Grand Marnier.
Cool.
Because they're both not as perversely fake and sweet
as
tasting as the Dr. Boston's triple sec or whatever.
I think that's what we got. We totally fucked up all the ingredients, but it was still pretty good. Grand Marnier, definitely pick up a bottle of that. And actually, I learned this. Grand Marnier is not a liquor. That's their brand. And the most common one, which is the orange liqueur, is, I think, something Rouge?
Cordon
Rouge, that's it, right? So that's the one that you'll probably be able to find in America most commonly. So I picked that up. And also, the reason why we didn't have a podcast last week was because I moved to a new place that is one stop closer to Manhattan in Brooklyn.
Nice.
And we moved over 5 avenues, I guess. Surprisingly, that's only one stop on the D train, but so we're now have access to the D, N, and R train. Super excited for that. And also I live a block away from Next Level Arcade. Super cool. which is it's the premier fighting game arcade in New York City, which there are no fighting game arcades in New York City, so that's saying a lot. But that's where they have, if there's a large fighting game tournament in New York City, it's probably going to be there. So I'm going to try to get better at fighting games now by going to their weekly tournaments, which are on Wednesday.
Dude,
see me on top 8.
You live in the best neighborhood.
When I make it to top 8.
You have 2 trains and a fighting game arcade.
Oh, it's amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, and there's also a Turkish place up the block, which has pretty good food.
Nice. I really fucking miss Turkish food so much.
Yeah, I think the guy is actually Turkish that runs it.
Most Turkish places are run by
well, I don't know, it's
Turkish
New York City,
people.
man.
It's a really difficult cuisine to just like pick up and do if you don't have that level of foreknowledge.
Yeah, it's true. But if you're watching the YouTube video, that's why I don't have my green screen up. I haven't really quite figured out how I'm gonna do it, if I'm gonna set it up in this room. But yeah, so no green screen for the time being. We'll figure it out. I might have to make a new overlay for the podcast, but we'll see. Anyways, Yvonne.
Yeah.
I don't really have a segment for this because we've just been talking. We've been having a good time, catching up. We haven't talked for a while.
By the way, there are like 8 different Turkish restaurants around you.
Oh, that's exciting. I know there's one on 5th Avenue that's pretty close to me as well, which is really delicious. But this is even a different one. So, anyways.
Oh my god, so many. So excited.
So Yvonne's gonna come visit me and eat Turkish food. we can hit up all of them if you want.
Just in a row.
In a row. It's really good.
You know what else is a cultural, political, foreign event happening currently?
Oh, that is a big statement, but I do not.
This is the way I'm swinging it.
It's a good swing.
So another country that has a difficult time within their political structure, other than Turkey, is China.
Yes.
One of the places where this is most visceral at the moment is Hong Kong.
Yes.
So currently there are protests that have been taking place in Hong Kong since March 31st of this year. It feels like it's only been going on for a couple months. Just because I listen to NPR all the time talking about what's happening, but you just don't notice the time passing and what's happening in Hong Kong.
Absolutely not.
And then I do get these occasional messages because I actually know at least one person that's in Hong Kong and has marched in the protests.
Yeah.
So, I get the occasional update of what's happening over there. But in the most part, at this point, it's become like background noise because I live in America and that's just how it happens. So Julien wanted to bring up this moment in time, especially with the new highlights of what Jackie Chan his very weighty political opinion on this topic. So we just wanted to delve in, a little bit and talk about what's been going on and what the trajectory of this looks like from where it started to where it can be going in the near future.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, this started from protesters in Hong Kong. Hong Kong being a British colonial city for a long time. Then it transitioned over to being part of China. However, there was a tacit agreement from 97 that there would be a 50-year integration period, basically where Hong Kong would be independent of China. This was something that was actually new to me because I had always thought about, well, Hong Kong is Chinese now, but how does that relationship work? I had never spent enough time to actually delve into it, and this protest series kind of enlightened, I think, not only myself, but a lot of people as to how Hong Kong and China hold relations, especially political relations. And so with that 50 years of independent rule, they started to see some creep from mainland China coming into the governance of Hong Kong.
Right. So as you said, Hong Kong is Hong Kong Island. Hong Kong as a city is sort of like is kind of like New York City in a way, because there's Hong Kong Island, there's Kowloon, and I believe there's one other island that is under the same sort of city territory.
Is it Lantau Island?
Yeah, I think so. That's it.
I'm just looking at a map of
that's
Hong Kong.
But basically, they're all connected through the same mass transit system. And then also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Macau is under. Oh no, Macau is sort of under the same. Yeah, I know. I was about to say it right. So it was a Portuguese colony. That's actually where my mother is from, and then her family currently lives in Hong Kong. Although I haven't been able to contact them because I think these protests are really crazy. I need to contact them soon. If you're listening to this, I love you guys, and I hope you're doing fine. No, they would.
Oh my God, Julien, I'm so worried now.
No, I think they're totally fine. My mom, I was like, Mom, aren't you concerned about your family? And she's like, no, this happens every year. I was like, Mom, are you sure? I don't know. You know what you're talking about. But yeah, so.
And for those who don't know, Macau and Hong Kong are basically across a bay from each other.
Yeah.
Both of them had long-term colonial rule that transitioned for longer periods than when mainland China became its own country. Independent country, solidified all around, and even communist. Yeah. So those have held on for much longer.
Right. So basically, the areas that are there's three.
When was that? You just were in Hong Kong fairly recently. When
2
was
years
the last
ago,
time
2017.
It feels like a year ago.
Yeah, I know.
So you have on the ground experience of where these protests have been happening.
Right. I just want to say that there's. Thank you. That's when I was there. It wasn't. It didn't seem like there was any sort of political tension there based off of my just going around in Hong Kong. And I also went to Macau. But I just wanted to say that there are three. China is a very strange country, if you couldn't guess. But there's Guangzhou, which is connected to mainland China. There's Hong Kong, there's Macau, and then there's Taiwan. Taiwan being a very special case. But Guangzhou, Hong Kong, and Macau are sort of the same situation going on. They're separate from, or at least my knowledge of Guangzhou, anyways. But it's like they say one country, two systems. That's how they say they're operating, right? So Hong Kong is essentially a capitalist economy, and they govern themselves. But the Chinese government the Chinese military is involved, and they will protect Hong Kong as if it was part of their country, and it is part of the country. So it sort of has a much more democratic way of governing itself. It's almost like America in many ways, I would say, and Macau is very similar, although China is a very interesting country if you just look at mainland China, in that they are communist, but they're definitely the most capitalist communists I can think of, right? So they almost entirely operate as a capitalist society. I would say they pretty much do, but I mean that's just I think that me looking in from the outside.
It's a very interesting political structure.
Yeah.
Again, there has been no fully communist country in the history of
since the Soviet Union.
The world. Even the Soviet Union wasn't a fully communist country.
Right.
It was probably Cuba and the Soviet Union were the closest. Probably Cuba was a bit closer just because it was a smaller scale.
Right.
So a little easier to implement. But there's definitely, I wouldn't call them a capitalist class, but there is definitely a political and economic elite that has emerged within the Chinese economy and governance, and the political structure is very, very rigid, and in general, I think that communism is a extremely tenuous system to be applied to such a large and populous country with such disparate historical linkages.
Yes.
Like, I mean, let alone the colonial history, just Chinese history in and of themselves is basically like, what, 3 countries rolled into one.
Yes.
Plus then you get the Uyghurs out west and
oh,
things
yeah.
like that.
It gets weird.
So it's just a tremendously, even though Americans tend to think of China as one people, there's a very
People's
complex
Republic.
layer of history and peoples and language and culture that reveals itself very, I think dramatically within the political structure, and just how to unite those kinds of disparate histories within such a populous and large, just geographically, country.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's just very difficult to make that transition and make it successful without strong arms, especially since the history of China has been a strong central committee.
It's, yeah, so China is insane, but it's a crazy country, I would say. But Hong Kong is sort of, since as you said, 1997, when it was handed over from British rule as a colony, it's been handed over to China. They made a 50-year agreement, so 97 to 2047. This agreement will probably be, if China hasn't completely taken over Hong Kong by then, it will probably have it'll probably be up for vote again, if I'm not mistaken. That's probably the situation that will happen, and then it'll be like Brexit, I guess, in some ways, but not nearly as detrimental to Hong Kong. If Hong Kong is the place of England in that situation.
Yeah.
So basically, with that, we have slow, incremental influence from China over the past 20 years. Or is it? Yeah, 10 years. Sorry. 10 to
20.
12, 20 years? Yeah, I can't do math. It is 20 years.
Yeah.
Yes. Obviously it's 20 years. 22 years. So we have slow incremental, China is slowly taking over or trying to influence Hong Kong in many ways, because I guess they see Hong Kong as a really large economic player in the world economy in some ways. I think they clearly want control over Hong Kong, or at least the Hong Kong economy.
It's an exceptionally important port.
Yes.
With the port,
I guess it's close to Japan, it's close to Korea.
On its own, the total GDP
of just Hong Kong
is like 381 billion, which is like 35th in the world.
So if China had complete control over that, then they would be very happy with their economic growth. It's a
tremendous economic boon.
Yeah.
Think of the taxes and everything that you could gain from having a handle on that economy. And I think to a certain extent, China does have a lot of interaction with that economy and some handle on it. But the main thing is Hong Kong still has its own governance structure, which is outside of the Chinese governance structure, to the extent that they have their own elections and things like that, which should maintain some sort of buffer between the two. However, we have seen with this creep of Chinese influence that some of the key positions have been people who are seen, at least, to be puppets of mainland China.
Yes. And so essentially what started this whole long string of protests that have been going on for the past, I think, month or so.
It's been four months since let me double check that, but it appeared that it's been going on for quite some time.
And I think they've escalated within the past month. That's probably why I'm thinking of it
yes,
this way.
They've been getting increasingly violent, and the reaction has become increasingly violent as well. Mm-hmm. So as we saw at the beginning of the protests, so the reason that the protests exist is that a law was introduced to extradite Hong Kong citizens to mainland China for crimes that would violate mainland China law.
Yes. Now
they have two separate codes of law. So this would mean that people who have pro-democratic, for instance, views, and in Hong Kong they can have some sort of voice and pro-democracy like protests or other things, but if those violate mainland China law, then they would be able to be extradited, so removed from Hong Kong and tried within the mainland China
yes.
Judicial system, which is heavily influenced by the elite structure of Chinese governance.
And if this bill is passed, it will therefore completely nullify the line in The Dark Knight: the Chinese will never extradite one of their own, which is the whole premise of that movie. God damn, no.
That's that capitalist class you were talking about, though. So, originally, the protests that were against this tended to be more peaceful. We saw the young and the old marching together, and people who were...
They had the students studying while they were in the protests for their tests.
Yeah, and during the weekend, we saw a lot of elder people walking in these protests and things like that. But as soon as it transformed to the week, where older generations were going to work, mm-hmm. Students began to have their own protests and marches, which took a more radical approach to voicing their disdain for this and opposition to this bill. So the student protests were immediately repelled. Riot police were issued to rebuff their march, which had incidents of like throwing stones or different kinds of just basically when you have slightly younger people in, they can get riled
yes.
up and are more prone to acts of extreme protest or not violence per se, but more militant demonstration of their views.
Yvonne.
Yeah.
As you were saying, these protests have slowly been escalating. You know, the youth have been getting riled up at these protests, and I think the real fear behind everyone is that we'll get another, because China has and when we say youth, we mean students and young professionals in Hong Kong. China has a bad reputation when it comes to defending, in quote unquote, against student protests. If we think back to Tiananmen Square, which happened, I believe, in 1982. I'm probably wrong on that year, but Are you
sure that happened?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that happened. The Chinese government doesn't believe that happened.
Okay.
1989 Tiananmen Square
Oh, it's
protests.
1989, sorry.
Yeah.
Completely off on that year. At least I got the 80s. Right, so allegedly 1989. I think the real year was 1982. But it's all up in the air now because the records are completely gone. Except for some of the photos that are on the internet.
Anything happened.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, I don't know I can't recall the exact reasons why that happened because it's all fake. But China has allegedly militarized their defense, to militarize defense until against student protesters in Beijing, in Tiananmen Square. So I believe if the Chinese government is to follow any sort of trend, they're going to start, if they already haven't already, that they're going to start sending in the military instead of just enforcing the Hong Kong police to do their bidding. So I think, and I really think these protests are escalating. I mean, the Hong Kong people have clearly spoken their voice, and they're not letting down. This bill for the extradition of Hong Kongers to China, should they break a law, is being put on hold currently. So there was enough protests against it that the Chinese government has just put it on hold, the signing of it. So that doesn't mean by any means that it's completely thrown off the table. I think they're still in discussion when they can sign it. So that's what the Hong Kong people fear the most.
So it being tabled means that it's still able to be brought forth to the legislative floor,
yes,
and therefore has the opportunity to be enacted.
Right.
So,
which is why these protests are still going.
Yeah, the Hong Kong people have no faith that
yes,
their leaders will
should they
that in terms of listening to the people and removing this completely.
Right.
I think that this is a place where the government of Hong Kong and the government of mainland China are looking to push their agenda and not back down.
Yes.
And this is what happens when when you get stuck between a rock and a hard place. It seems like this is a rallying cry which is super effective and reaches all strata of the Hong Kong populace, and has led to some of the most amazing democratic just marches and representations in the world.
Yes. I mean, think about the population of Hong Kong. I think it's only 8 million people. It's I mean, that's large for most cities, but these protests have consistently been getting, I think, above 1 million to 2 million people in the protests at once. So that's a freaking a fourth of your population is protesting one thing. That's amazing.
And it's all strata. It's students. It's school children.
Right.
It is adults who are in the working force. It's the elderly. All people are walking into these streets and marching to represent their voice and be heard, so that they can have what was promised to them, which was this 50 years of independent rule at the very least.
So you rarely will see, as you just said, this is a historical moment in Chinese history, and also, in terms of just protests around the world. So it's like you rarely see this many people, this percentage of a population in actively protesting their government. You rarely see that. These are some of the largest protests ever. So if China I feel like,
think about it. The 2000 presidential election was basically stolen in America.
Yes.
There was a completely bullshit and illegal way in which the Floridian governor, who was I believe, a blood relative of or a person who worked very closely to a blood relative of the president-elect. So
George W. Bush.
Yeah, so at that time, like, we saw people protesting, but it's not on the scale of what this is. I think closer to this is like Mexican protests when there was a discrepancy over who was getting elected president in, I think, the 90s. Just millions of people.
I think my dad
throughout Mexico
took me to a protest for the Iraq War in, I guess, 2002-ish, probably. Yeah, it would have to be after 2001, obviously. And I think in New York City, and I think we had about 1 million people there. But
I mean, in New York, you can get these numbers because it's a super populous place, and we saw numbers of the scale with the first Women's March recently had a tremendous outpouring,
and that was all
support.
Across the world. Oh, sorry, the country.
Yeah,
it's my world.
Probably had solidarity marches in various other places, and we've seen a lot of youth reacting to Brexit, and a lot of youth movements in Europe as a result of the 2008 financial crisis. But this is a very special and unique thing,
and I guess
doesn't happen all the time. And this is just
the Vietnam War is the only other time that I can think of in relatively recent history that there has been such an opposition to what a government is doing that this many people get active. So I really think this is definitely akin to that, if not way larger, and for good reason. I mean, this is what a lot of Hong Kong people have feared for a long time, and it's definitely a very, very slippery slope. And this isn't just like a small step in what the Chinese government can do to Hong Kong people if the bill is passed. It's a very large step, just taking people from literally extraditing them from their home, and then just completely could possibly jail them in China, right? That's essentially what this bill would do. So just completely removing.
And jail is, not necessarily the only place.
Right.
China is known to have extremely hard labor camps and show no real love for political prisoners.
Right.
So this is just layer upon layer upon layer of really important things that's happening. So the first protest happened on June 9th, and this most recent protest had something like 1.7 million people, according to
almost 2 million
the organizers of the event.
Right, and of course you can't count that many people.
I mean, but it's probably still close to 1 million, which is just gigantic. That's like an eighth of the population showing up in the streets at one time.
And not to mention, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to Hong Kong, but Hong Kong's not the biggest city. So if you get that many people in one area, you're going to completely block all of as they did. They blocked the roads. I think they had a sit-in in the Hong Kong airport during one of these protests, and they completely stopped everything going on.
There was a
I like that
resistance
airport,
protest
by the way.
to a mob attack that occurred in Yuen Long. And so as a response to that, there was a complete shutdown of the Hong Kong airport, which delayed or canceled hundreds of flights out of the airport.
Right.
And there were nice little signs that said, please wear your black shirt and do this in order to comply with the protest. And
they're going out of their way to be peaceful about these protests, which is great.
It's really great.
It's good. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully they find some sort of resolution that, and hopefully, I hope from my perspective, I hope that Hong Kong people don't back down, or don't get forced to back down, rather. I'm sure they won't back down out of their own will. unfortunately. I hope they don't get forced by the Chinese military to back down. But that being said,
I don't think that mainland China wants a repeat of Tiananmen Square, especially at this critical moment where is so much pressure from discussions with the United States on tariffs and trade.
Right, and they don't need to make enemies of the whole world because of how they treated their people.
I mean, largely the Chinese are insulated from global opinion.
Yes.
Just because of the sheer size and weight of their economy. So other states depend on the Chinese just as much as the Chinese depend on other states. But I would say more so because
they make everything.
Individual trading partners have much less weight than, let's say, if the United States and the European Union band together in order to combat Chinese currency and trade policies. Mm-hmm. But that's not happening, and so each individual partner, though, like the United States, is clearly a significant trade partner, they're not the end-all be-all of all trade. Just be the sheer weight of the Chinese economy in terms of just the material that it produces, it makes a lot of shit.
Yeah.
So it has a internal strength that allows it to withstand a lot of external pressure, not to mention the internal dynamics of the political and governmental structure are such that they can withstand even further. So the people on top, Xi Jinping, he is super insulated. Like, he eliminated his enemies and consolidated his power fairly recently. Within the past 5, I think, years, there were tremendous upheavals in the top political structure of China. So he's very committed to be maintaining his own political power and doubling down on the economic strength that political power enables. So I think that what is really the case is China being so, at the same time, so one, because they do have a historical unity in many parts of it, but also disparate in that there are segments of it that are stronger than, like, the states in the United States.
Right.
That you can find
especially
breakaway territories.
Taiwan, I think, has...
Yeah.
They're a whole separate topic in terms of just discussing how Taiwan exists and what's going on in Taiwan. Not that they're having any sort of protests of this level, but I assume they're not happy about what's going on in Hong Kong, considering they stand to be the next target of a bill. If this bill is passed, I think China could decide to, maybe take a step into Taiwanese waters and see what they can pass there. So there's
Macau.
And Macau,
well.
Yeah. I mean, all those casinos.
There is Tibet. There
Tibet,
are the Uyghur populations. There are...
I always forget about Tibet.
Places within China that have exceedingly abrasive relations with the
Chinese
government. Yeah.
And we haven't discussed. I mean, it seems like from our perspective that this sort of bill is very one-sided, and it would only benefit China. And I think that's true. But I
think it's a directive passed down from the Chinese government to begin the process of consolidation of Hong Kong into mainland China.
Yeah,
and I think this is one of the ways in which to ensure that process doesn't take 27 more years or whatever, but takes the next 5 years. I think Xi Jinping, with his consolidation of power, bringing into the fold these kind of auxiliary places, I think that's definitely part of the agenda.
Right, and it would be all but a formality at that point. that Hong Kong would be fully integrated into the Chinese governmental system.
I don't think that this would be
this isn't
the end of it.
Well, that's what I was saying. It's a slippery slope, right? Getting this pass is a huge step forward for them, the Chinese government, in integrating Hong Kong, and it does this sort of bill, and the Chinese government has the support of some famous Chinese people. As you said at the beginning, I think Jackie Chan. I'm not exactly sure on his exact quote, but he spoke out about the whole situation. He called for peace, I will admit, but it seemed like, from what I remember of what I read, he's in support of the Chinese government, and wants the bill to be passed. I guess.
Yeah, he
maybe not those words.
I believe stated that Hong Kong is his home, but China is his country as well.
Which is interesting, because I don't think that the way I perceive, and again, I'm not from Hong Kong, I only have family there, but the way I perceive how Hong Kongers view China is that it's not really, they're native to Hong Kong and they love Hong Kong, but I don't really think that they perceive that China is like, has their interests in mind. I don't think they perceive it that way, and I honestly, I the way I see this is they don't even speak the same language, man. People in Hong Kong speak Cantonese, and people in China speak Mandarin. And I know that when you're brought up in Hong Kong, you're brought up learning how to speak. You're brought up trilingual, and you can read. You're brought up learning English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. Mandarin for just for formality's sake, because it's the national language of China, but you're brought up speaking to your family in Cantonese, and so that sort of has an insularity. Most of the people in America that are Chinese, that are immigrants, Chinese immigrants, all speak Cantonese, and most of them anyways, and they're mostly from Macau, Guangzhou, or Hong Kong. So I feel like that language barrier alone sort of I guess, in a way, I know there's many countries that have different dialects, but I think that sort of speaks for itself in a way. I think that they prefer, this is all my opinion, by the way, this is how I view it. I think that they prefer to remain separate, and that's a huge literal language barrier, but also borders and governmental issues. I think that that's a really big dividing factor between mainland and Hong Kong, personally. So, which is why I find it strange that Jackie Chan, a Hong Kong native, would side with China in this situation. But that's my opinion on his take. My opinion on his opinion of the opinions that are going around.
Yeah. I think he's, I don't know. I don't want to necessarily express why he would say a lot of it, but it just seems that he's wanting, I don't know, some sort of unity and peaceful resolution of it, and I think that is a fine sentiment to have.
He called for peace. He wants.
You have to understand the militancy of a protest is generally in equal measures to the violence of whatever the protest is against.
Yeah.
So the the militancy of the protests against this extradition bill is in regards to the violence that could be brought on people who are extradited, especially as a result of people being arrested from this protest. The irony is, if the protesters didn't stop this bill from passing, but they were arrested for speaking out against the government, they could endure much more stringent political prisoner regimes,
Exactly.
prison regimes. So it makes kind of a lot of sense that they're like, hey, no, please, no.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, man. And then the other actor that has come in, Chinese actor that has spoken out against this, I guess, publicly, that we would know because of her relevancy, is because the woman who's going to play Mulan in the upcoming Disney live action rendition of Mulan has actively, I think she said she supported the Hong Kong police in their defense against the protesters, because again, China is influencing the police in Hong Kong to do their bidding, essentially, and sort of suppress these protests. And of course, I mean, the police are involved in all protests, right? They're or at least as far as I know, right? They have to be there to make sure peace is held. But the police have been, we have reports that they're tear gassing protesters, and they have, the, what's it called? The shield.
The riot shields,
yeah, that type of stuff. So they're getting aggressive towards the protesters, which have reported to be mostly peaceful. So, these types of things. So this woman, I think the Hong Kong protesters have called to boycott the new Mulan movie, even though it's...
And Jackie Chan movies.
That sucks. But Jackie Chan is retired, isn't he? Except for that last movie he made. So there are people, famous people, who are supporting the Chinese government, but this is just some of the reports that are coming out. So it's not all people supporting the Hong Kong view of things. I think there's another side to this, although I do not agree with the other side personally. So yeah, it's a very complicated issue. Hong Kong is a complicated place. China is a very complicated place. I hope we were able to explain it to you guys in a coherent way, and I hope you guys are inspired to do a little more research on the topic, because it's good to keep up. As crazy as America can be, and I believe most of our viewership and listenership is American, although that could be wrong about that. As crazy as America is being right now and is about to get, because the 2020 elections are coming up, there's a lot of other crazy shit going on in the world, and we hope that you guys have the time and make the time to learn about it. I think it's important. Just so you understand where people come from, and what they're dealing with. Not everything's just about America, even though we have to deal with a lot of... America influences everything in the world, so... Yeah, anyways.
Definitely...
It's important to know American history and American politics, because it influences everyone. But it's also important to understand what's going on.
Be a global citizen.
Yeah, definitely important.
Think about a lot of things. Anyway, Julien, thanks for bringing up this topic.
Yes.
I enjoyed going into depth about pro-democratic marches, which I feel that America is generally lacking in a lot of ways, and we've resulted to a lot of collectivism.
Oh, boy.
There's been a lot more, I think, calls to political action that kind of died down, I felt, a bit during the Obama years outside of elections.
Yeah. We got too complacent, Yvonne. Too complacent.
Yes, we did, for sure. And so I'm hoping that, this can be
too comfortable.
An example by which the American youth can take a look at themselves and be like, oh, okay, we can actually, go out and unite in different ways.
Yeah, I think it's a really good example, and I wish all the safety and best to the Hong Kong protesters. If I were there, if I were a Hong Kong citizen, I know I would be out there. This is a crazy bill. Yeah, Vaughn, we end our podcast every single week in a song in a segment called Hungover Radio. This is where you, the listener or viewer, can send in music to be played at the end of the podcast. Hopefully, it's something you wrote or played in a band or such. We'd love to share your music. It's free advertisement for you with the Hungover Gaming and podcast community. It's 104 strong now, Vaughn. We've got 104 subscribers. All you have to do is send it in to gaminghungover@gmail.com, or any questions that you have, or maybe a topic. If you want to hear us talk about something, find us on social media or email us. And if not, I get to pick a song, and it's going to be from a video game because that doesn't give us copyright strikes. So I've picked a pretty, this is a pretty popular video game song. It comes from Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, as I just started playing it on my Twitch channel as part of my Kojima legacy, where I'm playing through all the Metal Gear Solid games before Death Stranding comes out on November 8th. Let's call that the date. So yeah, this is Snake Eater from Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. I hope you guys enjoy the song. Hope you guys learned something from our podcast, and keep the conversation going in the comment section below. We'd love to talk to you guys about this. We want to hear your opinions on the thing, and keep it civil. I know this is a heated topic, and keep it cool in the comment section below. We'll talk to you guys next week. I'm Julien.
Bye.
Goodbye.
What a thrill, with darkness and silence through the night. What a thrill, I'm searching and I'll melt into you. What a fear in my heart, but you're so supreme. I give my life, not for honor, but for you. In my time, there'll be no one else. Crime, it's the way I fly to you. I'm still in a dream, snake eater. Someday you go through the rain, and someday you'll feed on a tree frog. It's ordeal, the trial to survive.